Hey guys, Clendros here. What's going on? So I've had a bit of a setback in terms of the recording for stuff this week because I still am sick, but you can probably hear it in my voice. But um, I didn't want to record the last couple days because it's just been like nonstop like coughing and wheezing, so it's not been pretty. But I figured I could do this song because it should be a relatively short review, and it's not going to be a long breakdown, and because this one doesn't have any lyrics, as it's an instrumental. So I thought that would be an interesting one to do. The other couple songs I wanted to do this week, the song by Quo Vadis and the Orphan Land song will probably have to wait a little bit. It depends. I might try and shoot another one today if I think I can get through a review without it, because I was really not happy with the results of the Sabotage review. And that's not the level of content that I would like to put out. However, the song was an important one to do at that time, because it was the anniversary of Chris's death. So that's why I did that one. Otherwise, I probably would have just not waited. I would have waited until now to do a review for this week. But so, anyways, it is what it is. I was not very pleased with it, but it's there. So I've got some. That's some latte, so hopefully I'll be able to get through this one without it killing me too much. So this song we're going to do is one of my favorites, and there you hear the cold again, one of my favorites from Scale the Summit, and it's a song called Kestrel. And the thing with Scale the Summit, people don't really, there's a lot of instrumental bands out there. There's a lot of instrumental guitar players, but the thing that I think sets a band like Scale the Summit and bands like them apart is that they're not just a shred band. I mean, there's a lot of guitarists like, your John Fives and your, Jeff Loomis's and stuff that have, albums geared towards a guitar player. And if you're a guitar player, you appreciate that kind of stuff. And, it's cool. And there's some good songs, actually, that are pretty accessible, I think, in that space. They get ignored a lot of times, but the difference with the Scale the Summit is they create soundscapes. When you listen to their music, it creates an image in your head, right? So it's different than something like Jeff Loomis or one of these other guys, where it's really a showcase for musical ability. Whereas with Scale the Summit, it's partly that, but more than that, it's mostly creating an image in your mind about. So the song titles are very important. If you look at the song titles for most of their songs, they really tie into what the music is saying, and music speaks. So you don't need to have lyrics necessarily to say something with a song, especially if your song is an idea or concept or a feeling. And this song falls into that category. So Kestrel is a type of falcon. So it's like a classification for falcon-like birds. So I don't know what all falls into that sort of category of being a kestrel, but they can hover. So I know that's one of the things that's special about them. But they're birds of prey, though. They're not like they're not like a hummingbird or something like that. So the only thing I can think of I know I read an article because I wanted to know what the origin. When I first heard the song, I knew immediately, without knowing what a kestrel was, that it was about a bird. But I didn't know what kind of bird. I had suspicions, but I wasn't positive, and I didn't know if it was a real bird or like a mythological type of creature bird. So I looked it up, and it's, you know, it's a little bit vague, in terms of what Wikipedia said that says a kestrel is. But let's see if I can give you guys more of an exact definition, because I think it really is important when you listen to this song to know exactly what they're trying to visualize in your mind. It's given to several different members of the falcon species. So their hunting behavior is that they hover before attacking, which is very, very important to know going into this song, because it really is visual, or, well, not visually, but it's visually represented in your mind, but it's represented in an audio sense in this song. So it's very important. Um, so that's, I think, the most important thing to know about a kestrel in terms of how the song is written and what it represents. So with that in mind, about what a kestrel is, and particularly their behavior as birds, it's knowing that it's a bird of prey, and that they sort of hover. I think it's very important to keep that in mind when we discuss the breakdown of the song, because it really will come into play, and I'll kind of point out some of that stuff as we go through it. It's such we'll get into it later, but it's really a brilliant song when you think about it in those terms. So without further ado, let's get into this song. There were a couple points when I went in and did the breakdown. There's not a guitar playthrough for this one. There is for a lot of their songs, but they didn't do a guitar playthrough for this one. But I found a live video that kind of gave me a little bit of an idea of what they were doing, because especially some parts of the song are extremely difficult to break down. So it is a relatively short song, though. So this is the Kestrel. Wow. Okay, so it's such an interesting song when you listen to it. Um, Jumping into sort of the breakdown on this one, uh, one thing that's interesting about this song actually is it's almost like a snapshot of kind of, I think, a fragment of time in the life of a kestrel is sort of the way I look at this song. Um, there's a fade in on this song, which is unusual just in and of itself because fade ins are not something you hear too often. Um, so there's a fade in, which is nice. And it's kind of just a very simple sort of picking pattern. And then it kind of, as the song continues to fade in, when you get to like standard song volume, the lead then comes in. The lead is played by Chris on this track, and um, it's interesting insofar as the fact that I guess they have a lead guitarist. I guess it would generally be considered to be Chris, but really both of the guys play. And I want to say the other guitarist's name is Travis, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, but insofar as that you know, there's a lead guitarist. I guess it would be Chris, but they sort of actually trade off in a lot of the songs. This one actually has a much more traditional structure in that way because throughout most of the song, the lead stuff that you think of as a lead is played by Chris, and then the sort of the rhythm in the background stuff is played by I think his name is Travis. Um, Anyways, so that's what's really interesting about this opening section. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about too that I love about Scale the Summit, especially this album and the album prior to that, actually, pretty much all their albums from Carving Desert Canyons to this album had incredible production. Very, very, very clear, crystal clear production, but it's not artificial sounding. So that is the one thing. And normally, like with most of these reviews, these are all bands that I like. So you don't generally hear criticism from me. But I am going to say that the one thing that about Scale the Summit, and I think it's sort of coincided with sort of the major blow up that happened within the band, the new album that they came out with, where after most of the guys had left and it was really just Chris. I really did not like the production on that album, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Everything was very cold and it's difficult to articulate, but it was the overall sound of it was still very clear, but it was just it lacked the atmosphere that their older albums had. And as a result, it's really kind of the first Scale the Summit album in a long time that I didn't really enjoy all that much, despite having some great guest performances by, and maybe that was part of the problem too. Since the band was so in flux at that point, there was all these guest performances, and I just kind of felt like the atmosphere that's typical of a Scale the Summit album just wasn't there, and it's a real shame too because they really have been so consistent from, I mean, like I said, Carbon Desert Canyons on, it's just they've been so on point for all those albums, and you get tracks that are weird, sort of funky experimental tracks, and one of my favorite ones like that is Orc Cloud because it's such a funky song, but they like to do experimental stuff, but a lot of their songs do tell a story, and I thought this one was a great example of one that did, which is why I really chose it. Um, so the bass is one thing I really want to talk about, um, and I think the bass player's name, if I remember correctly, is Mark. Um, this one's one where I want to make sure I get everything right. Yeah, okay, so it was Travis was the other guitar player, and Mark is the bass player. Now, um, it's crazy to me because the bass in this song is so apparent, and it's apparent in most of their songs, which is another thing that I thought was kind of missing from the new album too. That the bass sound wasn't really as apparent in the new album, but um, there's always a very heavy bass presence in those songs. But this is not one of those songs where the bass is really front and center in terms of having a lot of crazy bass parts. Like when you listen to a song like Atlas Novus, the bass is like, I mean, actually every instrument in that song is like they're all taking center stage. And the incredible thing is that it never feels like it unless you actually see it being played and you realize how difficult the song is to play. So it's one of those really funny things with this band where they make everything sound so easy, and a lot of times it's just because of the skill level, but also how the songs are constructed. So, but the bass is really great, and it sort of drives this section of the song, and then it's kind of kind of subtly coming up in the mix, and then it kind of is matching the melody line of this section. You have Chris playing a lead here that is in terms of the melodies being mirrored on the bass, and then there's kind of that picking the picking that's going on underneath, that's played by Travis. You've got a couple power chords that come in here. And then kind of at around the 1 minute mark, there's sort of a major change in the song, where it moves. The melody section here is again all lead driven, still very laid back at this point in the song, but it's lead guitar in tandem with the bass again. And then at around a minute 10, there's a tapping section. That's based off of that melody that they kind of brought in here at the beginning, and then there's a double tapping section at like around, I think, a minute and a half, with both guitars, and that's sort of kind of a slow build up, and this is sort of taking us into like the main part of the song, and I wanted to kind of talk about up to this section, because we're coming up on a section here at about 2 minutes and 20 minutes, and it's kind of that, like I said, that slow build up where they brought back those early melody lines, and there's this sort of ominous heavy bass groove that comes in at around 2:45. So I want to sort of stop there and talk about the song up until this point, because I think it's important for understanding the visual story that this song, I think, is sort of telling. That first part of the song, to me, is sort of that, that majestic bird of prey. I mean, because falcons are incredibly majestic creatures. They're beautiful birds, but they're also incredibly dangerous birds. So I think this part of the song is really sort of giving you that visual of this beautiful majestic bird just sort of flying around, and then when we hit this 2 minute and 30-second mark, or 2 minute and 45-second mark rather, that's sort of the bird going into attack mode. So it's, like I said, it's sort of ominous, but if you read about how the kestrel, as a particular type of falcon, attacks, they sort of hover before attacking. So, which is like kind of a trademark of like these kestrels apparently. So I kind of think that this sort of ominous section is just sort of the bird preparing to attack. And then we go into this. This is my favorite part of the track, which is like there's this part where the guitar comes in at 3 minutes, and it's this really awesome like tapping riff, and it's not one of the most difficult tapping riffs that they have by far. like this one is not like chord tapping or anything like that, which is one of the really crazy things that they do in like Atlas Novus, which again, like I mentioned about how they fool you into thinking this song is a lot more like simple than it really is. Because a lot of this stuff, a lot of the chords and stuff, those beautiful chords that are being played in Atlas Novus are all tapped. So it's very, very tricky stuff. And this is just more of a tapping riff, like a tapping lead, like you would see. It's across multiple strings, but it's not super crazy. And then at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds is kind of when this, if you think about it as the bird hovering, and then this, I would say this section is the bird going into a like an attack, like because like with a lot of times the birds of prey, it's almost like a dive bomb type effect, right? So like this part with that riff to me is the bird sort of diving, and then there's this great crescendo at around, I think it's around 3:20. And then the music stops completely at 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And I kind of think of that as the moment right before the bird grabs whatever it's attacking and just starts, tearing it apart. And then, boom, everything just sort of comes back, and it's this crazy chaotic section at like 3 minutes and 30 seconds or so, and it just, to me, it totally symbolizes this bird just ripping whatever it is to shreds, and it's really crazy in this section because there's so much stuff to talk about. It's a very fast tapping riff on the lead, and then I don't even know what's going on the rhythm section on this one, because it's a bit of an overload. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's very chaotic, difficult to process. But the one thing that really stands out in this section, and is not something I would say that's typical for Scale the Summit, but the drumming is unbelievable in this section. It's like basically bass fill after or not bass fill, a drum fill after drum fill, just sort of basically back to back. It's almost like a solo, but there is a pattern to it. It's not like it's completely it's not like just a solo, but it's just an unbelievable section. And then at 3:50, there's this really this funny little section here, which I guess it's maybe the bird sort of resetting and going back up, to continue his, his hunt, right? And it's this like Van Halen type riff. It's like a simple, like string skipping, like Van Halen riff, and it's really kind of funny. It's not out of place in the song. I mean, it works totally in the song. It's just it's not something that I would necessarily attached to a Scale the Summit song, mentally speaking. So that I thought was really cool, and it's funny because that Van Halen thing sort of morphs into, because it's basically a solo guitar riff that's played by Travis, I think, and then the whole band comes in, but it's on the offset. So it's you have drums and bass come in, and then you have this cool like second guitar bit that comes in on the offset on the second repetition of this particular riff, and this takes us to about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then we build up again to another attack from like what I think of as an attack from the bird, where it's it's found another prey, and it's once again it's attacking, and it's just shredding this whatever it is that it grabs, and that takes us out to the end of the song where you get this abrupt ending. So I think I just really like this because it's one of those songs like Atlas Novus where it gives you such a such a clear picture. I mean, at least for me anyway, such a clear visual picture of what the song is trying to say. And I don't know if they even have that in mind when they're writing the song, but that's sort of what it even said to me before I even knew what a kestrel was. I imagined a bird flying around, and I couldn't quite figure out the chaotic sections. Didn't make sense to me until I read what a kestrel was, and then everything made sense. But yeah, I mean, this song is, aside from the talent level, obvious. I mean, you can hear the song, and it's clear that these guys are just insanely talented. But the compositional skill required to make songs like this, and not to mention a whole album of songs like this, is just off the charts. I mean, this is genius level songcraft. Being able to craft a soundscape is not something that I think very many bands can do. Not especially not an instrumental band. And there's not many. There's very few bands out there, I think, like Scale the Summit, that are able to craft a sonic tapestry like they can. There's other instrumental bands that do a really great job at crafting instrumentals. I feel like Intervals is a really great band that does fantastic instrumental work. And their songs also tell a story, but they don't conjure the visual landscapes to me that Scale the Summit's stuff does. And that was why for the first instrumental song that I did, I kind of wanted to do this one because I felt like it was really a unique example of what an instrumental can be. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Like I said, hopefully I'll be able to get to another song either today or tomorrow. So I'll be able to maybe get 4 out this week, but I was really hoping to do 5 this week with that extra song, the Sabotage song. So, it is what it is. If we can get it out, that would be fantastic. I'll just have to see how my voice is holding up. Yeah, but this is a really, really fantastic song and a really fantastic album. I would say if you're looking for a starting point to the band, an entry point that is really representative of what the band can do, I think The Migration is their strongest album overall. But this is a very good album. And I don't know. I think it's really tough. It's really tough to beat. V was a very good record, but yeah, Migration is the one I think that stands out to me as the one that, for somebody getting into a band, I think it's the most important one. So we'll kind of have to see, what the future holds for this band. They released the last record, In a World of Fear, the one that I was not really super happy with the production on, by themselves, and I think maybe that might have been part of why the production sound was not as good to me. Their previous stuff, the ones that I liked the production on, all of them were ones that were put out by their label Prosthetic Records, which is what this was on, Prosthetic Records. So we'll just have to see what happens. Like I said, the last one was self-released, so I don't know what the current status of the band is. They're just such a unique band. I think it'd be a huge shame if they sort of disappeared, but it certainly did seem to hurt them to implode the way that they did. It's admirable that that the band just didn't completely dissolve altogether, but at the same time, it's very tough. You look at what's going on. The same thing happened to Vector, and I don't know if they're going to survive or not. I know he's working on a new album, and he was always the driving force for that band. Both musically, lyrically, everything. But it's just very difficult to, I think, to recover from that. I mean, it's bad, and it's tough enough to make a living as a musician. So, anyways, that's it for this review. See you around, guys. Stay metal.